Welcome. The show is in honor of a show for veterans and their families and for the general public as well. We bring you information regarding veterans and things that they should be concerned with and things that we can do to help them. Today we have Paul Dietrich, my co-host, as always. Paul, thank you very much. And Paul survived vacation with grandchildren down in Orlando, and he's in one piece, so he did well.
Amazing. It was another combat tour, I think.
Yeah. A special guest today is Jared Sterk. And did I say that right?
Yes.
Good. Jared, tell us a little bit about yourself. Now, you're a veteran. You served in...
I'm a veteran myself. I served in the Marine Corps from 2004 to 2008. And now I work as the outreach coordinator for the Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Center, based out of NYU Langone Health.
Okay. Tell us, what is Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Center?
So we provide free mental health services for veterans as well as their family members. We provide them free of cost. We have no wait list. And although our focus is on post 9/11 veterans, we see veterans of all eras and any discharge status as well.
Okay. Notice that part about the any discharge status. That is sometimes opposed to the VA, who does not normally handle those with less than honorables.
I think they've upgraded, they've changed their policy, but for a long time that was it, and we would be referred patients all the time who could not otherwise seek services from the VA.
No, Stephen A. Cohen is a not-for-profit.
Correct.
Right? And they no charge whatsoever to the families, members?
We do not charge at all for most of our services. We do retain, we have a psychiatrist, and if someone needs some medications, that gets an insurance, but if the person has VA access, they can use that as their insurance, and so we work with people.
Okay.
But the general services are free of cost.
Okay. Can you give us an idea of how the program works? How does somebody get into the program, and what are the triggers that somebody should be looking for in their family? Let's say the veteran is at home or a member of the veteran's family. What are the triggers that you look for?
You know, I'm not a clinician myself, so I'm probably not the best person to advise on that.
In general,
a large number of our patients are self-referrals. So I go out into the community and I speak to people, tell them about our services, and a lot of people they see that there's a great resource available and they take the initiative and they call our number here on the back of our brochure.
Okay.
Now what happens with that is somebody calls one of our intake coordinators, they put them through a brief phone screen where they ask them their name, what branch were they in, what year did they serve, things like that. Our clinicians get together later in the week. They have a big meeting, they discuss, you know, the different intakes and that type of thing. They assign the case to one of the clinicians, and then the clinician reaches out to the patient, and then the clinician and the patient will schedule their first meeting. And it's generally a week, 2 weeks on the lower end of things.
Well, some of the things that we were talking about before was I mentor veterans at the veterans courts here, and to me, what was shocking to me was that the 3 veterans that I've successfully mentored have all had traumatic brain injuries and PTSD.
Yeah. And
I say to me that that's shocking, but it sort of leads me to believe that the reason they're in court, in issues with the court, is because of those injuries that they sustained or that condition that they sustained during the service. And that, to me, is why it's shocking. And I go back to my discharge from active duty, and 2008, when I came back from 2 years in Iraq, I was 5 days in Fort Bragg, and I was back on the street. And I can understand why some of these veterans are having issues after that long of a period in combat and then back on the street. It's like you're going from night to day, and all of a sudden you're on your own. We've gotten better at it, but I still think the issues are there, and that's why we're seeing as many veterans as we do with difficulties later in life. So I think it's important that services like this to help veterans with PTSD in particular, traumatic brain injuries are out there and available for veterans. And I think it's important if there are family members and you think that your loved one has this issue, that they at least get evaluated for it. Like I said, I was not evaluated for it. I went to the VA on my own. So,
yeah, the fact that you're relocated out of your life here in the States, and they've taken you out of your suburban neighborhood or your city neighborhood, and bring you over to a place that's desert.
where people are trying to kill you.
People trying to kill you.
Yeah.
Camels. All the differences, in the world. In my case, it would have been Vietnam. The guys went into Vietnam. They went into the jungle and the swamps and the unbearable heat and humidity, to the unbearable heat and the humidity in Afghanistan and Iraq. Afghanistan was cold, am I right?
In the winter, it's cold.
In winter, it's cold there. So, your whole life is turned upside down. Plus, you're worried about getting killed.
Yeah.
Okay, you're worried about having to kill somebody.
Yeah.
That doesn't come easy.
And just the sights and the sounds that you see that are so different from your normal environment all contribute towards this. I talk about, I came home from my daughter's wedding, came home on leave. I was able to make it home. And I remember driving down 95, and I had already been in Iraq for 9 months. And my heart was racing. I was extremely nervous. And I couldn't put my finger on why. And I started to realize about the time we got to Delaware that I'm driving down a road and there's no concrete walls on either side of it. And I'm sorry, but every place in Iraq has concrete walls so you can't get hit with blast. I was stressing because of what I had been under for 9 months.
Yeah.
And this carries through to you the rest of your life.
You kept going to your hip for your sidearm.
Well, that's the other thing. I kept reaching, where's my pistol? Because you don't go any place without your pistol.
Yeah.
In some places, I went with pistol and rifle when I went to the West. But
we get a lot of these sorts of stories all the time. I've heard things myself of trouble driving on the highways because of, for example, garbage on the side of the road. It could be a place where somebody hid some sort of a IED in Iraq. But if you're here in New York, New Jersey,
probably just a slob.
It's probably just some garbage, but people, they pull over, they avoid it, they change lanes to get away from it. And so these are the types of things that a lot of veterans experience.
And I think after serving a tour, and I keep going to Vietnam, but in your case, Iraq and Afghanistan, you're now lifted out of that, and they drop you off back home and say, okay, go back to your normal life. But you can't.
Yeah.
You can't.
A lot of people have seen things, witnessed things that, pretty out of the ordinary. And I think a lot of it is also just the difference in civilian life versus military life. Civilian life can be pretty lonely. You don't have your unit, you don't have your friends anymore. So
you always have a buddy.
Whatever your plan is, maybe you get out of the military, you go home, go to college, get a job, but it's not the same as the people who were in your unit. You don't see them on a daily basis. You probably just go to work and go home, and that's your day.
And your friends that stayed behind and didn't go military, when you got home, they were different.
Yeah, so
you perceived them as different. They perceived you as different, and in reality, both of you were.
Yeah, it's kind of something I experienced myself. you leave the military, you don't have those friends anymore. You spent years away from the people you grew up with, went to high school with, so that's different. And so it's kind of like isolation from both ends of things.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I'm not a clinician myself, but I think that coupled with some various mental health concerns some people may have from their deployments, it's kind of compounds problems.
Yeah. So I think we had talked before that while you're not directly associated with the VA, you do get a lot of referrals from the VA, particularly for services that you have that the VA doesn't necessarily have in this area. Could you talk about that a little?
Yeah. So the Manhattan VA is actually our largest source of referrals. They are one of our formal community partners, and you know, they do some great work. There's a lot of veterans, though. They can't help them all. There's some different things that we do that maybe they may not offer.
Can you tell us like what?
We see families, for example. That's one of our biggest things.
Excellent.
We can see veteran family members, and those family members may not always be able to access the VA because we are a nonprofit. We can we have some different rules regarding what we do. So a family is not necessarily a spouse. We can treat, especially with post 9/11 veterans, boyfriends, girlfriends, kids, stepchildren, whoever the veteran defines as their family is generally who we can see.
So you actually can treat the family.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
and I think that's a real important thing because the stress is not only on the veteran themselves, but the whole family is under stress. My own example for just as an example was my wife had never had ulcers.
yeah.
9 months after I'm deployed, she's down in the hospital with ulcers and never had them before. Gee, I wonder why. Worried about all of the stress. My son, for example, had moved out of the house.
Yeah.
And because I was gone for a year, moved back to have somebody with her. These are all things that are stresses on the family that wouldn't occur without the military service. And maybe her ulcers would have happened anyway, but I don't know. There was an awful lot of tension there that after 30 years in the military, all of a sudden your husband is deployed and gone into a combat
And
zone.
every night she'd go to bed saying, "Is Paul safe? Is he going to come home?" You know, I mean, and all you need to help that along is the media in New York,
Yeah.
or the media any place, but especially in New York, because they
They
will
only
make
report the bad.
exactly they will make a mushroom out of a story
Yeah.
that probably didn't even deserve coverage.
So I think this is a very important thing that the family stresses are quite often ignored.
This is something thousands of military families across the country experience,
Yes.
and the majority of the United States has never served in the military, so people aren't necessarily aware of these things. But there's big military towns all over the country where, you know, your story is kind of the norm. You know, there's
Yeah.
Yes.
spouses and kids, and they all go through this. These places like you know, Jacksonville, North Carolina, or you know, San Diego, or outside of Fort
Drum,
Campbell,
New York.
Fort Drum. There's just thousands of families that this is their experience, and there may not necessarily be any kind of services for them to sort of cope
So
with these types of
This is
issues.
an extremely important item out there for the families here on Staten Island to know
Yeah.
that there is such services available to the entire family.
Yeah, and so we are located in Manhattan, but we have recently branched out. We have a telemental health program that I know it's not necessarily very convenient to come in all the time from Staten Island. So we have our telemental health program, which is kind of like Skype or FaceTime with a clinician. Some people, what they do, they'll come in once in person, they'll meet their clinician,
And then
so they can, you know, just to get a feel for it. But they don't necessarily have to. Some people will come in once a month and then do the in-between visits from home. It's really up to them and what works best. And so you have a lot of flexibility. And so the people from Staten Island, Long Island, Westchester, upstate New York, they can all access that service.
How
So
long
for-
do these programs work? I mean, if we go to Stephen A. Cohen Veterans Family Center,
Yes.
is that indefinite? I mean, does it go on or do they have a cutoff point?
We are generally described as a short-term model. However, the majority of issues that we treat people for are things that can be successfully remedied in a short-term model. So post-traumatic stress, depression, anxiety, these are not necessarily things that may not take years and years to successfully treat. And so that's one of the things we do. However, we don't ever boot anybody out. We generally just do a pretty good job of treating their issue, and so when they leave, they're generally happy.
All right, so if I don't feel like I'm cured yet, they would keep me.
We would help you out. Whether that be staying with us, maybe there's a community partner that would be best equipped to help you out, but we don't ever just kick anybody out or anything like that. A lot of people hear about the short-term thing and they think you're just thrown out into, we don't do that.
Well, I'm sure that would be a concern of anyone's.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
we don't do that. We have a wide array of community partners, and we have a great staff, and we can work with people.
I think it's also important that we link this back to what I think is one of the real tragedies, and that is 20 veterans a day committing suicide.
Yeah.
And in most cases, it's a mental issue that sort of leads them towards making that decision to take their life. So here's an opportunity to shut that down and shut the entire issues that they have with the family down and get them resolved and move away from that 20 a day norm. And that's why these types of things are important to veterans. I really think that the coming back from service, going back into society, that there needs to be a much better transition.
Yeah.
And this program, to me, is a part of that transition back to normal life. And I really think it needs to be expanded. So.
Yeah, so we hear all the time about the 20 suicides a day. Sometimes it's 22. I think 20
Yep.
is the accurate number. The overwhelming majority of those veterans that do unfortunately commit suicide are not enrolled in any kind of care.
Yes.
And so our whole thing is removing barriers to care. So we try to make it as convenient as possible for someone to come in. We have no wait list. We provide Metro cards to people who, if they can't afford a Metro card. We have the Telemental Health program for someone who lives too far, or traffic, or something like that. Daycare, issues with if you can't come in because you can't have anybody watch your child. That's one of the reasons we have the Telemental Health thing.
It's something I wish that the VA would expand on, because we hear that quite often from our female veterans. And there are trying it out in certain places,
but yeah, our brand is removing barriers to care, you could say. We want to make it as convenient as possible.
How does the link with the VA work? Can somebody come direct to you and then go to the VA, or do you refer it over to the VA, or do they have to go to the VA first to come to you?
If somebody wants to use our services, they can just call the number on the back of our brochure.
Which is?
The number on the back here is 855-698-4677. A lot of people have already been in the VA, and perhaps there's something that maybe we are best suited to treat, and that's why they'll steer them our way.
Excuse me.
But then there's things that they do pretty well too, and they do far better than us in many cases, and we gladly refer to them as well. So
it goes both ways.
Yeah. I mean, it's a collaborative relationship, and they're a big help to us.
If I decide I want to come to you and not go to the VA, I can do that.
For mental health
Yeah.
care, yes. Yes, somebody does not have to be enrolled in the VA to come to us. We're a totally separate entity.
And there are some people that would do exactly that because they may not want to, put that label with the VA.
Some of the other concerns that I've heard about going to the VA, whether they're justified or not, are people like police officers, that type of career. Going for mental health treatment is not always the best career enhancer for them.
Yeah.
I mean, they are carrying a weapon. So that type of thing, maybe going to the VA would be considered not the best option for them. So this may be an option for them to go to you. Can you talk about the confidentiality or anything like that in that area?
We are totally confidential, and we're subject to all HIPAA rules and laws and that type of thing, which we take very seriously.
Yes.
It is the law. I know that some police departments ask about these types of things during the hiring process. I can't necessarily speak to, the best way to handle that, but we are totally confidential.
That's very important.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a police officer, and I could see a police officer not wanting
Yeah.
to have that label attached to his, his
Yeah.
job.
It's definitely something that is perhaps a struggle that a lot of officers have to deal with.
Yeah.
I know a lot of officers are also veterans.
Oh, yes.
I think there's different organizations that do work with police. PAPA is one of them.
Which is?
PAPA, it's I don't remember what it stands for, but it's something similar, I think, within the NYPD that they can reach out to. I'm not an expert on it, but I think there are some organizations that will help officers.
I think the most important thing is that if you feel you need help, call a number.
Yeah.
And sometimes, even if you don't think you need help, call a number.
Yeah.
These conditions normally do not get better.
Yeah.
They remain with you for the rest of your life. So these need to be resolved so that you can get back into society and continue with your life.
Now, we don't just treat post-traumatic stress and that type of thing. We have a whole number of issues. So I think a lot of people might be hesitant because they view things certain ways, but there's a lot of people who just, the transitioning out of the military can be tough, and maybe you're stressed all the time, and you get the blues because your transition isn't going the way you expect it to be. So these are the types of things that we can help out with. It's not just post-traumatic stress or traumatic brain injury.
Well, I know PTSD didn't become a label until after the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Okay. And there are an awful lot of Vietnam guys that haven't addressed this issue, that till today still carry it with them.
Yeah, it's something I think that is just always, it's from the beginning of warfare, it's always been an issue.
Exactly.
I know they called it shell shock for a while.
Yep.
They called it combat fatigue. They called it, I think, soldier's heart.
I've told the story a million times. My father, we were having dinner, and it was a family dinner, and there was tremendous storm came, and the thunder was like unbearable. My father was artillery.
Yeah.
Well, the first crack of thunder came, and Dad was under the table.
Yep.
He dove down. He had a flashback.
Yeah.
He thought he was in North Africa again with artillery. And, so it's been there. It's just it was never addressed.
Yeah. There wasn't necessarily the resources at the time, World War II
Or the
era.
recognition.
Or the recognition. A lot of times, didn't General Patton famously slapped a soldier?
Sure.
I think
Well,
they say in hindsight
yes.
it was post-traumatic stress.
We were heroes.
Yeah.
and we had to be men of steel.
Yeah.
And whatever you saw shouldn't affect you.
Yeah.
But in reality, it did. In reality, it did, and you carried it with you for the rest of your life.
One of the questions I'd like to hear about, though, is right now the largest group of veterans that are going to the VA and for treatment are the female veterans. Do you have any specific programs for them?
We don't necessarily have a specific program for them. However, we do pride ourselves in we have an above average number of female veterans who utilize our services. I don't know the exact percentages, but it's definitely higher than the overall what the female population is in the military, because we specifically reach out to female veterans.
Good.
And some other underserved communities.
And it's just another whole complexion onto the situation of coming back into society from serving.
I mean, there's a lot of issues that a lot of women in the military face and deal with, and these weren't really recognized, I guess, until recently, and so these are
Most recently,
they're very recently, and so these are the types of things that we try to reach out to.
Now, Stephen A. Cohen Military Family Center is affiliated with NYU Langone?
Yes, NYU Langone. We're located on 1 Park Avenue in Manhattan, and we're a couple blocks from the main hospital.
That's very important also.
Yeah.
And once again, this is a not-for-profit.
Yes.
Okay.
We're conveniently located off the 6 train, if anybody needs to come in.
Tell us a little bit. Who is Stephen A. Cohen?
Stephen A. Cohen is an investor. His son joined the Marine Corps, I believe, in 2009, and he was deployed to Afghanistan, and it sort of made him interested in these sorts of issues. And he was originally, I believe, on the board of directors, or he was on the board for Robin Hood, which was our first funder. But then eventually he decided he wanted to really go big with this, and so he became our largest funder. And in 2016, that was in 2012. In 2016, he actually began the Cohen Veterans Network, which is an entire network of clinics just like ours, or similar to ours. We're all a little unique, all over the country. He gave the largest, I believe, donation to the veteran sphere in history, which is $275 million to open these.
Wow.
And so there's clinics in Philadelphia, there's 4 in Texas, I believe. There's Dallas, El Paso, Killeen, San Antonio. There's one in just outside of Fort Bragg in North Carolina. There's one in Colorado. There's one in Washington State. San Diego is opening up. So there's gonna, I believe, be 25 of them. So they're popping up all over.
I want to thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're watching in honor of. We love bringing these shows to you. We hope that they're helpful to you and your family. And you just keep watching. We'll keep bringing you more information. God bless.